You had posted this a while back because we spoke about this maybe a month ago, and when I saw it, I dove into it. I saw the title and I was like, well, just for the title alone, I have to bring him on the show. And then I actually did that wacky thing that only weirdos do, and I read it, right? And I found it very interesting because my friends and I, like I was saying this a little bit off air, we've had similar conversations around this idea of the death of cool. And you're coming at it a little different perspective than us. What was the impetus for you to want to write this piece?
Well, in some sense, I've been thinking a lot about, as you said, this sort of double-edged sword of a kind of bourgeois cultural capital. Like,
Mhm.
are double-edged in the sense that it does two things. One, it sort of offers a justification as to why these people are rich, powerful, etc. Right? It says that these people are not just rich, they also have a kind of cultural sensibility. They understand the world in a different way because they've read the right books and they appreciate the right art and so on. So it both justifies a kind of hierarchy, but at the same time, it offers a kind of promise that if you read the same things and understood the same things, you could enter into that hierarchy as well, right? You could become part of this class. And it both explains and justifies class divisions, but also offers the promise that those class divisions can be crossed. And I've been thinking a lot about just the absolute decline of kind of cultural capital. Really, I think it was last year. Um, there's this book by Dieter Eribon called Returning to Reims. And Dieter Eribon grew up, he in this working class town in France. And he eventually went to Paris and like he read the right books and he became an intellectual. And it's a little bit about like his shame of his like working class background, but also his shame of being ashamed. Um, and when I taught this book in a class, the thing that seemed like crickets, like fell on to completely just like no one got it, was the idea that there was some kind of class ascendancy tied to cultural knowledge. It's like people
Really?
just don't see that as having that same role anymore. Um, and so I was thinking about that, and then in the sense that maybe nowadays it's just enough to be rich,
Mhm.
um, but being rich always seems like I mean, obviously there is, and I talk about like there's a famous line, right, that Marx has that like in capital, finally the boss is just a rich person. We understand how he got there
Yeah.
by having more money. And there's
Mhm.
nothing else to it. There's no aristocratic halo. They're not better. They don't have blue blood coursing through their veins. They just happen to have more money. And there's this, kind of argument about whether or not that makes things more stable in the sense that capitalism can spread the idea that we all could become rich, and thus we're not upset by or frustrated by huge inequality because we just dream that one day we'll be on the other side of it. Or the flip side of this is this argument that perhaps societies that have no, I mean, to some extent, societies that have had ideas about natural superiors have lasted much longer.
Mhm.
And a society in which the person in charge is just a person with money may be a very unstable kind of society because it constantly produces resentment and anger. So that's part of it. But then I started thinking about the way in which I can't remember which particular event set it off, but it was just something about like maybe Elon Musk and his desperate attempt to be cool and just this idea that they wanted to replace the old cultural capital of classical literature and so on with a new kind of cultural capital of pop culture that seemed to be cool, and they were just completely failing. I mean, every time Musk makes a science fiction reference, he always gets it so wrong. Like when he referred to the Cybertruck as the car Blade Runner would drive, it's sort of like, well, yeah, but no one really calls. I mean, everyone knows the movie, but no one calls anyone Blade Runner in the movie. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's
uh,
not said.
it's just it's only in the. In fact, if you don't watch the bastardized voiceover version, you never hear. Well, you hear it once. You do hear it once. They say you're Blade Runner, I think, is
Yeah.
uttered once, but there's no real explanation of it. It's not really how people who know the movie talk about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just seemed like such a kind of misstep in a long history of missteps.
Before, yeah, I kind of wanted to ask this first question, but then you because of what you said right there, I kind of want to riff off that because I remember Peter Thiel maybe a few years ago trying to reference Star Wars and saying that Han Solo actually is the kind of the epitome of what he wants the world to be. These kind of go for self people that is only motivated by money, and that's what Star Wars was really about. It's like the story of Solo. It's like, no, it's not. There's no way in the world you can watch that movie and say that this guy, it's the story of him. There is, I mean, there's something about these guys that reminds me of a Bret Easton Ellis novel. Easton Ellis talks about elites quite a bit in his work, Less Than Zero. Maybe many people watching this show have seen the movie, which is extremely different than the book. But I think there's one through line that persists between both of them, which is these people are kind of thumbing their nose to a certain degree at the things that do separate them from regular people, right? There's one I don't know if it's an opening scene in the movie, but in early on in the first act, when they're looking for Robert Downey Jr.'s character who's off doing smoking crack, they go to these clubs that are playing music that isn't necessarily what highbrow elites are supposed to be listening to. One club they go into, they're playing rap, and another club they go into, they're playing Slayer. Which again, these are kids that are the third generation spawn. Again, if you go by the book, of mega rich Hollywood people. So they're kind of slumming, if you will. Within the movie, I don't know. Again, I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's probably been a minute.
Long time ago. Yeah.
Every time they have to pull up to a party, there's a ballet there. That's just so odd to me. And even the parties that they attend are on this other level to me. The fact that one of the characters wears a suit. The 80s feels like a time where younger rich people are slowly trying to break away. Is this just a natural maturation of rebellion for younger people? Because some of these people achieve a certain amount of success at a relatively young age.
It's true. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think also in part, I mean, you bring up music, and it occurred to me when you're talking about that, like, I don't think I've ever heard, and not that I follow these people, that close, but, I read the entire Palo Alto book. I read a couple things about, Silicon Valley, and I've never heard any of these people mention music at all.
Just the US Festival in Wozniak, right?
Right.
Can you hear me, Jason?
I can hear you.
Okay. The first thing I thought when I read your piece was Steve Wozniak and the US Festival. Because that to me is a moment where, and that's the first one's in 1982. That's a moment where the success of this kind of almost newly deregulated field of finance and technology is flexing its muscle by throwing a massive music festival that really rivals Woodstock But culturally, and I'd love to know how you feel about this, again, kind of staying on why these guys don't talk about music, because I think Steve Jobs makes music a real big part of Apple down the line.
Right, right.
But we don't look at the US Festival, which only happened twice, and the second one was where it was like multiple days. There was way more people that went to the US Festival that go to Coachella. It's about on par with what you got at Woodstock when it comes to like hundreds of thousands of people. In the United States, we just don't have festivals that large. They may seem that big, they're not. As someone that worked there and knew the counts, there's only like two in the States where you get six figures of people, and that's Coachella and EDC, which is a big rave. So the fact that happened and was the kind of jump off, if you will, especially the second US Festival, of what we're later going to call hair metal and even heavy metal. That really is the jump off for that music, for it to see the pop acceptability of it, for record labels to go, okay, we can invest money in these, quote unquote dinosaur bands. The heavy metal, they did more because it was you bought your tickets for the day you wanted. It wasn't like these package deals. So I think it doubled what the next day was, and David Bowie was a headliner the next day in 1983 with Madonna, and I forget who else was on that bill. So these should be cultural touchstones, and we talk about Woodstock all the time. We talk about Coachella all the time. We talk about Altamont all the time. Why don't we talk about the US Festival? Is it because of the people that are behind it?
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't talk about it, so I don't know. I mean, I think, because you mentioned you're having conversations about the end of cool. I mean, I do think that it is possible to argue, and I've thought about making this kind of argument from time to time, that like a big part of cool was predicated on scarcity, right? Scarcity of knowledge and information. Like you had to know about this and that band. I mean, I remember, as a kid, as a Gen X kid, trying to figure out what the bands I listened to, what bands they liked, right? And tried to figure that out by like reading liner notes,
Yes.
looking at pictures of someone showing up wearing a t-shirt. Oh, what's that t-shirt? What's that band? Got to figure out who that is. And it was all predicated on a certain kind of scarcity, where you're dealing with like breadcrumbs. And of course, that sort of scarcity has disappeared with the very internet these people have in some sense created, in the sense that it's now, it would take an afternoon to figure out all the sort of stuff that it took me years to figure out, because they all have, all these bands have Wikipedia pages or other sorts of things, and you can trace, this guy went from playing this in this band and now he's in this band, and so on and so forth, all that sort of stuff. So the scarcity is completely gone. And like I remember people getting like in arguments about this, like trying to preserve that kind of scarcity. Like, hey, don't wear that shirt to that show because people will see you and they'll know about your secret band, right? It was very much about preserving a certain kind of scarcity. And so, I mean, this is independent from the whole. I mean, it's related to Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley destroyed a certain kind of scarcity that made a certain kind of cultural capital possible. And so to some extent, like maybe chasing cool right now is sort of chasing something that's a mirage and sort of vanishing on its own at the same time. I mean, I imagine that kids today still have some way of understanding who is cool and who's not cool, but it can't be predicated on the same sort of knowledge about certain sort of esoteric things, because any knowledge about esoteric things would evaporate pretty much at the moment of being enunciated.